Hi, it's Dr. Noel Williams, Optimal Health Associates, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, March 20th, 2020. Going to do the COVID-19 update. First, big thank you to all the people who have said nice things or emailed me or texted me or Facebooked me. Appreciation. Not everyone's polite or nice about this, so I really do appreciate the support. Likewise, I do want to thank several doctors who give me input on what to talk about. Fatima Jeffrey at Integris, who's a VP and a wonderful internist. Dr. Carl Roszkowski, who's a vice president there, Dr. Bill Bondurant, and most importantly, David Chansom, who's in my wife's giving me a look like I'm not doing this right. And David Chansom, who's head of infectious disease in the entire Integris system, and I will relate some of their messages as we do this. Likewise, let us not forget those who, in this time of COVID, are having personal life crises with sadness, anxiety, family members who've been in car accidents, cancer, and please be supportive and reach out to those people too, because it's still going on, and some of them I think are sometimes not getting the support they would have normally gotten in a different time. So what's the update today? Well, we're going to start with the world, and then we'll go to the US, and then we're going to go to Oklahoma, the center of it all. So world data, we went from about 235,000 cases to about 275,000 cases, or roughly that. We're about 30,000 cases up, so maybe it was 245, which is a huge jump. It's the biggest jump we've had. Likewise, we've had about 1,300 deaths over the last 24 hours, which again is the biggest jump we've had. So that is a bummer. And getting information out of some centers here in the United States, it's not good news. New York is averaging 1,000 new patients a day. Their hospitals in the intensive care are getting full. I got a report because of Dr. Jeffrey on what's going on in one group of their hospitals, because she has relationships there, and it's not good. I mean, there's lots of critically ill patients, which is not being put on the news, but people are starting to get really sick, because you have to understand with COVID, first you get kind of sick, then your illness is going to escalate up if you're going to fall into the category that's dangerous, which is going to be about 20%. And then in that 20%, half the people are going to really get sick and get the bad pneumonitis, and then potentially go into what we call acute respiratory distress syndrome. And so SARS is sudden acute respiratory distress syndrome, which just means your lungs fill up with all this inflammatory gook. It's kind of like you're drowning, is to keep in mind. So think of the SARS effect is you have inflammation first, or something called pneumonitis, and then if things are going against you, that interleukin I mentioned the other night is skyrocketing, and then that is a pro-inflammatory mediator, and you then fill your lungs up with inflammatory mediators, so you're drowning in inflammation. So then when you breathe in oxygen, it can't get across the inside of the lungs or the alveoli to cross into the bloodstream, because there's too much gook in there. And so that's why people die, ultimately, in some respects. So what happens then is you get ventilated, and there's pressure in the ventilation in the lungs to force the oxygen in. Then there's something called ECMO, which is basically you get on kind of a heart and lung bypass machine to oxygenate you. And that's a sign of desperation. And then, unfortunately, when those things fail, you die, and that's going to be happening more and more now. So the process is you get infected, you get sick, you then can worsen, and then as you worsen, you can go into these lung things. And then there's a secondary event that happens, which is, unfortunately, we're starting to see this in the United States. Some of the people who start to get better, getting better, and then all of a sudden they get acute cardiomyopathy, which means their hearts fail and pretty much to an extent fall apart, and become flaccid, and then you just die within a few hours. And that's what they're starting to see in New York City. So it's a really important thing to realize that the escalation of cases in the United States is going to happen first, and then the number of deaths is going to start to skyrocket, which we'll begin to see in the next 3 to 7 days. We're still in a terrible situation with testing. I'm full day 3 from my test. I feel fine. I've been informed by the people who did the test that it's now 5 days in Oklahoma City to get a test. My brother, who's in the San Francisco area, is a senior manager for Kaiser Permanente, which is a large medical group that takes care of 10 or 15 million people across California, and he helps run a very large lab in the north part of Northern California. They're running 1,500 tests a day there, and they're on day 4 of opening it, and their turnaround time is 3 to 4 hours. Across their system, they're somewhere around 4,000. They'll be up to 10,000 tests within 45 days at his center, and they'll be doing, just with Kaiser, probably close to 40 to 60,000 tests a day with a 3 to 4 hour turnaround time within the next 30 to 60 days. In Oklahoma, there's, again, very little testing. The ERs have testing. I had my test, which I'm thankful I did get, but again, we're, for some reason, completely behind here with the testing that's being offered or our access to tests, which ultimately has to be somewhat of a governmental problem, but there's nothing any of us can do about it right now. All the hospital systems are trying and the labs are trying, but we're clearly second or third tier level of excellence right now. So then in the United States, besides the stuff going on in New York and California with the illness, there's this whole thing of shelter in place. And people don't understand what shelter in place means. It basically was originally kind of a nuclear war type scenario. If there was a nuclear war, a biologic weapon, or radioactive weapon exposure, you would just stay home and shelter in your house, or shelter in the center of your house, or in some kind of bomb shelter type thing. Hopefully you would have supplies and you would be fine if you sheltered inside. So the more modern definition now, or the current one, is shelter in place means you stay at home. You don't go out, you don't do things, you only do essential activities. There is a voluntary shelter in place in New York. There's a more formal legal shelter in place in California that Gavin Newsom put in place, the governor. He's backed off a little bit from calling it formal, but if you go out there for unnecessary activities, you could be charged with a misdemeanor. It is the first step towards quarantine. Several other states are doing it, but I think now, as we're getting into the rub of this disease process with 19,000 cases in the United States, and about 250 deaths, if I remember correctly, we're going to definitely be going into the quarantine mode. I may be off and we may crest over 25,000, but we're getting deaths or infected before we start the quarantine, but I will be very surprised if it doesn't start by Monday. But we'll just have to see. I don't get to make the decision. If it was up to me, I would immediately lock the whole country down. If it was up to David Chansome, my infectious disease friend at Integris, he would lock the whole country down. And the message he wanted me to say to all of you tonight is, if you're driving down Broadway Extension or going down Northwest Expressway, why? You need to be at home. You need to shelter in place. Unless you're doing an urgent, needed thing, you need food, you need a medicine, something of major league importance, not a video game. Oh, I need some briquettes for my broiler, something like that. You should stay at home. You are going to regret not staying at home as our state booms with corona because we're currently 45th in preparedness in a little journal article that came out in the United States, and Wyoming was 50th, but they have the least number of cases and they all live a million miles from each other. So that one isn't as bad, or at least it's more reasonable. So really we're about the bottom, in the very bottom, in terms of preparedness or acceptance. So we are going to pay a price for that. So I would really, really encourage all of you to start staying at home, stay away from crowds, and do the right thing. Additionally, spring break. there's a lot of people in Oklahoma who went away for spring break. When they get back, they need to be quarantined from you. It's they're all fine people. We love them all, but they are going to be carrying a massive amount of COVID-19 back to the state. So if you have a medical problem, you're older, you have heart disease, you have pulmonary hypertension, you're immunocompromised, and one of your children or relatives went to Florida, which is a hotspot, or Colorado, or pretty much anywhere now, but those two places in particular, they need to not come within a mile of you for 2 weeks. They are a disease vector of infectious disease for you, and you do not want to get COVID-19. So then other things in the state, on the positive side, the state health department, I think, is getting very, very active. I have to give them a lot of credit. From what I'm hearing, they let go of the head epidemiologist, who shall remain nameless. He got demoted to a position that I don't know what it is, but he's not our epidemiologist, and that's perfect because he had, I think, essentially failed, which I had felt for several weeks and communicated online here. But the state health department is really focusing on getting excellence going. I give them tremendous props for that. The hospital systems, again, in the Oklahoma City area are really gearing up to be supportive to all of us. So that's a huge positive also. So in general, I think we're starting to get ready in Oklahoma. We're lagging terribly on sheltering in place. We're going to have to deal with that soon. I'm certainly hopeful the governor Snit will make a statement in the next day or two encouraging that for all of us, because people need guidance from the government, since sometimes we can't make the wise decisions on our own. And I would anticipate, again, Monday or Tuesday, that we're going to go into quarantine. But again, I can be wrong. I'm just a person. Other little things to know: if you're actually in my practice, there's been some changes in scheduling. We've stopped annual exams or any non-routine visits. Medicine refills, we're just going to do those, but I won't bore anyone with that stuff who's not part of the practice. There'll be a separate post on that tonight, but please don't watch that unless you're in the practice. I don't want anyone to have to deal with me even more. And that's really the summary today. The shelter-in-place stuff's happening. The disease event intensity is going up massively. The media is not bringing that up. I don't think they want to scare people and show them what's happening in ICUs in New York City, which is really pretty terrible. But the medical community in New York City, by the way, is completely mobilized for the people who live there. It's amazing reading the information I had from Dr. Jeffrey today, how they're just, they're knocking it out there. They're critical care doctors and pulmonologists. So a lot of credit to them. So we're going to be ready here in Oklahoma. We're going to do fine. We have great doctors. We have great medical people. We have the Oklahoma State Health Department completely engaged now with trying to get things organized. So stay positive, take your zinc, take your melatonin. If you have gotten a prescription for Plaquenil, that's awesome. Ask your doctor how to use it. And on a final note, I get a lot of emails and texts and things for personal decisions in medical care. I can't provide all of the level of care just via text or phone or whatever if you're not in my practice. I will try to do the best I can with directions, but there are limits on what I can do in patients who are not actually in the practice. Please understand that and forgive me. So take care, and I'll update you more tomorrow. Good night.